In this episode of Coolgrad videos, we're going to talk about when you land abroad. All the excitement, the things you do. So you got your admission from the university, packed your bags, got your visa and got your tickets, and you actually landed there. So what do you do when you land there? So this talks about all the activities that you need to keep in mind to perform when you land there. For the first time abroad, excitement in your eyes, and these are some of the tips about do's and don'ts when you land abroad. So first of all, at the port of entry. So whichever airport you land in is your port of entry. So remember that some of the small towns where there are a lot of universities located, they don't have international airports in those cities. So for example, if you're flying to like Houghton in Michigan, so you would have to go through either Detroit or mostly through Minneapolis. And if you're flying to a small town like say, well, in Irvine, Southern California, they have the biggest international airport is Los Angeles, which is about more than an hour away. And then you might have to fly to a nearby airport, that is Santa Ana, which is just like about 10 miles away. So a lot of cities don't have an international airport, so you might have to fly to the nearest international airport and then take another flight to that city. So whichever airport you land in at the first time in that country is your port of entry. So, like for example, even if I was going to Maryland, if I landed at JFK, New York, that is my port of entry. And when you land there, now the United States has 327 ports of entry that include 115 airports and 14 seaports. So you have to go for immigration check at the port of entry, and you have to show them your passport and your ticket, and the visa has to be stamped on the passport. So, and they might have some more supporting documentation that they ask for. So you have to fill out your immigration forms, and they're going to ask you some questions. What are you coming here for? So if you have a student visa, you tell them, I'm going to pursue my master's in mechanical engineering at this university, or I'm going to pursue my MBA in this university. And then they say, how long are you going to be here for? And maybe they might ask you some questions related to funding, and they're going to ask you where you're going to stay. You're going to say you're going to go there and find housing, and usually they stamp your arrival and they approve your stay for this period of time, and they allow you to enter the country. And sometimes at the port of entry, they can refuse to let you in. This has happened to people. I've known people, especially with like tourist visas, B1 visas in the US, they get the visa and they land there, and then maybe the immigration officer sees that this person has been traveling to the US for like 6 months every year. And the third time they may say, I'm going to let you stay only for 1 month, and you have to leave. So the duration for which they allow you to stay there depends on the immigration officer and a lot of other criteria. So like tourist visa is meant for tourism, and at one time if you enter a country you can stay maximum for 180 days, and if you overshot your stay, the next time they're going to be very careful about letting you back in, and they're going to create problems for you. So always make sure you don't overstay. So sometimes you go there on the tourist visa, and at the port of entry, the immigration officer may ask the parents, for example, why they are coming to this country. And if they give them some lame excuse like, I'm coming here to babysit my grandchildren, or my daughter is expecting a child, I'm coming to see the child, they might say, no, ask your daughter to come back to India and bring the baby so you can see the baby there. A tourist visa is for tourism. It's not for babysitting your grandkids or helping your children out. So they might flatly refuse to let you in. They have every right to do so, and they might just ask you to go back. And sometimes they might just let you stay for a very brief period of time. So you have to be very careful about these things. And there is something called an I-94 form. So from 2013, April, they started this paperless I-94 form. I-94 is like the departure and arrival form. So every time, earlier they used to staple it on a passport. It was like a paper that they would staple, and when you left the country, they would take off the I-94, and every time you arrived, they would staple the I-94 onto your passport. But now it's all paperless I-94, so if you just Google it, you can go online and download your I-94 form, and it'll tell you when you arrived in the US, when you left last, all these details. And you'll see all the details in your I-94 form. You just go online, enter your passport number and your social security number and some password and some details. And once they know it's you, they'll give you your I-94 form online and you can print it out as and when required. So the immigration officer looks at your travel documents. They ask about the purpose of your visit. They may take your digital picture and your fingerprints, and they stamp your admission on the passport along with the date of entry. So you must try and bring, if you have any problems in the I-94 form, you see that it was wrongly entered or your name was wrongly entered or the date was incorrect, you must notify the immigration authorities immediately. How to convince immigration officers? So, I mean, if they're coming on a tourist visa especially, they have to convince the immigration officer that they really should let them stay for like 6 months, if they want to stay for 6 months. So, if they tell them they come for tourism, there's a long trip planned and the entire family is going on all this big vacations to Yellowstone and Niagara Falls and, you know, all these things. You don't have to lie, but if you talk about tourism, your chances of being allowed to stay are longer. If you talk about just visiting your family, then your chances are slimmer. And sponsors can give a request letter. For example, if your parents are visiting the US or somebody who doesn't know English is visiting the US, and then the parents are there and they don't know English, so the sponsor, like the children who are sponsoring or the relatives, they can give a letter to which the people can show to the immigration officer saying, I don't speak English, or I'm like physically disabled, I can't speak, and you give a letter saying, you know, I've come here for this reason and whatever, and you can explain it to the immigration officer. You can also ask for translation services if required. So just your schedule to overcome jet lag. So when you land there, sometimes you'll be waking up at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. It's quite okay. Try and exercise, get a lot of sunlight, get a lot of exposure, and be very active and try and get a good active lifestyle. And that's the best way to overcome jet lag. So at night you get a good night's sleep. And jet lag is also about adjusting to a whole new environment. So if you're throwing up for some time, it's okay, it's quite normal. And you'll get over it, you should get over it in about 2 weeks' time at the most. Finalize housing and roommates. So you landed there, maybe you're staying as a Tempaco for a few days with some of your seniors, or maybe you're looking for, you're staying in a hotel, or maybe you already have an apartment that you booked earlier, you go there and then you have to finalize roommates. So watch my video about housing and roommates. So make sure you pick the right kind of housing, apartment, a comfortable apartment that's not dirty, and make sure you pick a right kind of roommate, a broad-minded roommate who doesn't steal your food, who doesn't pick fights with you every day, who's not a cleanliness freak, like, who drives you crazy, and who's not the kind who would copy your homework or who gossips and create problems. So there's a million ways in which they can ruin your peace of mind. Make sure you pick the right kind of roommates. So please watch that video about, there's one video about housing and one about roommates. Please watch those. And next, you need to purchase some basic stuff for your apartment. So go to Walmart or Kmart or Safeway or Fry's or any of these places and buy some laundry detergent and dishwashing soap and, buy some Scotch-Brite. You may need to buy a vacuum cleaner. Usually if you're a student, you can probably rent it from the leasing office. You don't even need to buy one. And buy a trash can, buy some groceries, and buy a bath mat, and buy a shower curtain if required. So these are basic things that you need to go and get. You can ask your seniors for a ride usually. Get an internet and cell phone connection. So some of the top cell phone providers are AT&T, Verizon and T-Mobile. So you can think about which of these networks has good coverage in that particular area in the university where you're going to be studying. So in that particular apartment, that area, if T-Mobile doesn't have good coverage, you don't get the signal, then you better buy AT&T. Or if AT&T is not good, then you better buy Verizon. So some of these network carriers, they usually have a contract. Like if you buy a phone, they give you an instrument like almost free, but then you have a 2-year contract with them. If you break the contract, there's penalties and stuff. But the last time I knew, T-Mobile didn't have this contract. So you can just get a phone, maybe you pay a couple $100 for a smartphone. Or if you have your smartphone from India, you can always carry it. and you can buy a SIM card over there and then activate it. So if there is no contract, it's good because you might have to break it any time. So sometimes you get a lot of these used television sets and things like that for free. People give them away if they're shifting. So look on Craigslist, www.craigslist.org, CRAIGSLIST, Craigslist.org, and search for all these free buys and try and get some things if you can't afford to buy them. So sometimes you can purchase a TV plus internet connection for a very low cost. So a lot of people use WhatsApp and call home for like free, almost free. And sometimes you can also use calling cards to call home. Remember, please don't call home directly to India from the United States. So if you directly dial the number, so if you're dialing from the United States, you would first dial 011 to make an international call. And then 91 is like India country code. So 01191, and you usually dial the cell phone number, and it costs you about $2 a minute. Be very careful. Be very careful about lending your cell phones to anyone either. Because if somebody is asked to borrow your cell phone to make a call and they dial an international number, you're like screwed. You get a bill for hundreds of dollars. So always use a calling card. So they make you dial a local number and then usually connect through VoIP or something. It costs you about 1 cent a minute, usually, or less than that. And WhatsApp is like free. So some popular calling cards are Amantel, Reptel, Dial 91, Zaptel, Keku, Roll and Bowl. I used to use Roll and Bowl for a long time. It was quite good. Viber, and then there's Google Voice and there's Vonage. So make sure you understand their terms and conditions right before you buy Vonage. Sometimes it seems like it's only $10 a month, but then later you might realize you end up paying more. So make sure you understand the terms and conditions of usage right before you sign up for these. Give your emergency contacts to your friends, roommates at the university. So if you have some relatives in the US, your uncles, aunts, cousins, whoever who can be your emergency contact, give their details to your roommates and friends. So if anything happens to you, they should know whom to contact. Or your parents and family back home. Give their contact details to your family members. About your family members to your roommates and friends. So if something happens to you, they should know whom to contact. So this is very important. Apply and get your social security number. So a social security number is a 9-digit number. Usually 9 digits. It's given by the US government. And it's the primary ID of a person in the US. So other than people having tourist visa, everyone else has to get a social security number, whether it's a employment visa or student visa, or you have a green card, or you're going there as somebody's wife or fiancé or whatever. You have to have a social security number. And usually your bank account and your credit scores and a lot of other things are tied to your social security number. And they ask for it when you rent an apartment, they ask for it when you're opening a bank account, everywhere. So you have to apply and get a social security number. So usually the university, there's something called the Indian Students Association, and there's also an international association, and there's international clubs, and sometimes the university international department, so they organize like a bus or something where all the students can go to the Social Security's office and apply for a Social Security number and get it. Sometimes if your name is not spelled right, sometimes if they didn't get your details right, they might screw it up and you might have to go again to get it fixed. So make sure you give your first name, last name correctly spelled out to the Social Security's office. I think it happened to some of my friends. Their names were spelled wrong and then they got it wrong, and so they had to go again to the Social Security's office to get it fixed. So usually you get your Social Security number within 1 or 2 weeks. Social Security number is required when you plan to purchase a house, when you purchase a car, when you apply for a job and you have to go through a background check, when you rent an apartment or a house, apply for a loan, open a bank account, travel abroad, purchase a cell phone plan, apply for a green card. So your Social Security number is really important and you have to have one. Open a zero balance bank account. So some banks give you a cash reward when you open a bank account. They want to entice customers to their banks. So they usually give you $50 to $250 when you refer a friend. So just think. suppose there are 10 people and they can go in pairs, and each person can say I referred this person, and or they can go like clockwise and say A refers B, B refers C, C refers D, that way. So all the 10 of them can get $250 each. Isn't that cool? So you can just go as a pair. So one day you take your friend and say, hey, I'm referring this friend to open a bank account here. And that person, you referred him, so you get $250. And the other person takes you the next day and then he refers you, so he gets $50. So these are some tricks to get some easy cash. And don't choose a small bank just because they entice you with free buys like this, okay? Don't choose a bank that has very limited coverage. So try and go with a big bank like Citibank, Chase Bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo Bank. These have ATMs and branches in almost all the major cities, and you have better service. So try and go with a bigger bank. Don't go to a small bank just because they try and attract you with all these offers. So if you get a Videsh Yatra card from SBI or Axis or whatever, your parents can refill this from India, and you don't pay a dime on like Western Union or remittance fees. You can get this Videsh Yatra card from SBI or similar cards from India, and if your parents can charge it in India, you can already use it in the US. So you can have a second zero balance account from an online bank like Charles Schwab or Ally. These banks don't charge you anything when you use an out-of-network ATM. And so it's good to have at least 2 bank accounts. It happened to me once. So I was in California and one of my roommates gave me a check for, I think, $400, and the way it was written, it somehow, she wrote like 400 and a slash like that, and the ATM read it as 4001, and I somehow said yes, and then so I got a credit of $4,001, whereas I was supposed to get $400. So the bank, she had an account in Bank of America, and Bank of America realized the mistake, and then they debited the $4,001, and then my bank, Wells Fargo Bank, also realized there was a mistake, and they double deducted it. So they again deducted $4,000, and then it took me like about 1 month to get this sorted out. They were so stupid and inefficient. They made me run from pillar to post. They realized they had done a double deduction. All they had to do was credit back $4,000, and somehow my bank balance went below zero, and I was living off my credit card because this happened. And it took them like almost 1 month to fix this. They were really, really inefficient, both the banks, like Bank of America and Wells Fargo Bank. So it's good to have your money in 2 different banks. So even if you have a problem with one bank, you lose your debit card, credit card or something, you can always use another bank. Meet all the faculty members of the department. So introduce yourself and ask about what courses they teach and what their research interests are. So ask if they need a research assistant or a teaching assistant. Ask about funding, ask about their courses. So meet all the faculty members and introduce yourself. Determine which courses are best for you for that semester. So try and understand the nature of each professor and their grading policies and how tough their courses are, and talk to our seniors about what their experiences were with these professors, and determine which courses are most useful and relevant and which are good for you, and sign up for those courses. So watch my videos about how to excel in academics, and they have a wealth of information about this. Try and register in more courses than the minimum. So if you need to take minimum 3 courses, register in 5 courses, and then you can drop off of 2 courses. So that brings us to the end of this talk about what you do when you land abroad. And I hope you make the right decisions about roommates, and make sure you get your social security number, and make sure you pick the right courses and overcome your jet lag, and get ready to excel in your academics.